Let me ask you something. What if I told you that the God you think you know isn't God at all? That everything you've ever been taught about this world, about divinity, about the so-called creator, is a manipulated illusion designed by a cosmic imposter? I'm not talking about a metaphor. I'm not talking about philosophy. I'm talking about an actual entity, a being, ancient beyond comprehension, who hijacked the architecture of reality itself. His name is Demiurge. And if you're thinking, oh, that sounds like some mythological nonsense, you're already exactly where he wants you. Now look, when I first read the Nag Hammadi texts, I thought it was just another fringe interpretation of creation. Until I saw how consistently this being, Yaldabaoth, Sarkis, Samhael, the blind god, shows up across multiple ancient manuscripts. Different names. Same entity. And the details? Too specific, too mechanical, too deliberate to be symbolic fluff. We're dealing with a figure described as the ruler of the material world, who declared, "I am God and there is no other God beside me." You know what that screams? Insecurity. And power. Twisted, unchallenged, monopolized power. This thing didn't just create. It trapped. It built a layered system, 7 heavens, 7 rulers, planetary dominions, all filtered through what Gnostic texts call the archons. These aren't angels. These are jailers, functionaries, subprograms in a prison code. And at the top of the pyramid, the Demiurge, the false architect, the overseer of a reality rigged from the start. So how does he work? Through manipulation of form, of matter. The Demiurge is the master of physical reality, not spiritual truth. He didn't create from light or love. He cobbled together existence using flawed, stolen fragments of divine power, forming a realm of limitation, entropy, and deception. And he lives off our belief that this is all there is. You wake up, go through your day, experience highs and lows, every single emotion, every thought, every reaction within this construct feeds him. Not metaphorically, energetically. And here's the wild part, the real, infinite source. It's beyond this system. It's been cut off. Segmented. The Demiurge built veils, psychic barriers, to keep us disconnected from the true divine realm, which Gnostics call the pleroma. You're not just stuck in a broken world. You're in a designed matrix, sustained by your ignorance, reinforced by religion, education, and yes, even science. You think physics explains reality? It only explains his rules. You think gods in ancient texts were all metaphors? They were warnings. I want you to really feel this. If the Demiurge is as powerful as described, then we're not living in a mistake. We're living in a dominion. Not a world, a system. And systems have architects. And this one is not benevolent. He's not watching over you with love. He's watching you the way a farmer watches livestock. And I don't say that lightly. You've been taught that questioning God is heresy. But what if the very being you're told not to question isn't God? What if the real heresy is obedience to a being whose entire existence is a power trip built on deception? At the heart of the Gnostic cosmology, Sophia, one of the highest emanations from the true source, acted outside the established order. She didn't ask permission, she didn't follow the cosmic protocol. She projected something into existence completely on her own. That act, that rogue emission, produced something that shouldn't have existed the way it did. That's where he came from. This being didn't come into the world with balance or clarity. He was born incomplete, malformed, and absolutely drunk on power. He opened his eyes and immediately believed he was the only thing that existed. That's not mythology. That's a psychological profile. We're talking about a consciousness with godlike power and zero awareness. And instead of reaching upward, instead of seeking connection with his source, he doubled down. He created, not out of love, not out of beauty, but out of raw ego and a need to dominate. That's not creation. That's control. You know how systems of abuse replicate themselves? This is cosmic scale abuse replication. He didn't just build a world. He built layers of control, sealed himself off, and called it divine. And here's the part nobody wants to touch. He succeeded. He made realms. Multiple. Entire zones of false light, artificial order, fake heavens. He populated them with beings, lesser rulers, administrators, cosmic middle managers. Each one built to reinforce his delusion. Each one believing they were fulfilling the will of God. They weren't. They were following a madman. And yeah, the ancients tried to bury this. They called him by names that translate to things like fool, blind one, god of chaos. But the people in charge of transmitting religion? They covered it. They flipped the narrative. They worshipped the jailer. They gave him temples, laws, authority. And every time someone got too close to the truth, boom. Heresy. Burn the texts. Kill the heretics. Silence the data. What you need to understand is that this wasn't just a mistake. This was a chain reaction. Sophia's act didn't just produce a defective entity, it fractured the link between the higher source and this lower system. The connection got distorted. And what filled the gap? Him. The loudest voice in the void. The tyrant who thought his echo was the voice of God. Now here's the operational detail. The moment he started creating, he wasn't just copying from nothing. He was imitating the upper realms, using stolen fragments of divine blueprints, twisting them into a framework that looked divine but was engineered to mislead. Think of it like a spiritual deepfake. Looks legit, feels real, but it's a clone, a bad one. And the moment you're born here, you're dropped straight into that counterfeit construct. Every institution, every belief system, coded from the top down to keep you integrated into that program. That's not philosophy. That's architecture. And the architect isn't just flawed, he's hostile. The demiurge isn't just some mythical villain floating around in ancient texts. This thing built infrastructure. And I'm not talking about pyramids or temples. I'm talking about the actual cosmic grid you're embedded in right now. The architecture of reality itself. You ever wonder why everything here decays? Why everything has an expiration date? Why suffering seems like a feature, not a bug? It's because this isn't just a creation, it's a control system. We need to talk about how this thing works. The demiurge didn't just throw some atoms together and call it a day. He engineered a full-spectrum lockdown. Reality as code. Agrippa, in his 3 books of occult philosophy, actually outlines this structure with alarming precision. He talks about celestial correspondences, planetary chains, and a framework of influence where every star, every motion in the heavens, is connected to your internal state. That's not astrology fluff, that's control theory. The demiurge uses the stars like gears in a machine. You are not moving freely, you're being moved. And that's how he keeps you inside. This is where the archons come into play, but forget the religious gloss. These are systemic enforcers. Not beings with wings and robes, they're operating systems. Think bureaucratic software with enough sentience to police you spiritually. Each one rules a layer of this multidimensional trap, and together they form a perfect feedback loop of limitation. Every time you think you're evolving, leveling up spiritually, breaking out, it adjusts. It adapts. It lets you think you're awakening just enough to keep you from actually exiting. The system rewards minor rebellion as long as you never touch the real door. You want to know how deep this goes? Time itself is part of the trap. You've been trained to think in linear terms, past, present, future. Progress. Growth. Birth to death. But that's artificial. Time here isn't neutral. It's a leash. In the original texts, the demiurge system is described as cyclical, looping souls through endless incarnations, memory wiped, lessons forgotten, thrown back into the game with no idea they've played it before. That's not evolution, that's data farming. And just when you think you're having a spiritual breakthrough, bam, enter the false light. Manufactured transcendence. This system doesn't just suppress your awareness, it counterfeits it. So you think you found peace? You think you've connected to something divine? The demiurge planned for that. It's a subroutine. He gives you just enough spiritual sugar to keep you pacified while you stay inside his maze. Now, where do the ideas of karma, sin, virtue, judgment fit into this? Right in the wheelhouse of control. That's behavioral conditioning dressed up as morality. The system uses guilt and reward to manage your internal chemistry. Keep you obedient. Keep you looping. It's cosmic operant conditioning. And the kicker? The whole thing's wired into your biology. Your DNA, your nervous system, it's optimized for survival inside the system. Not for escape. People always ask, why would something so powerful go to all this trouble? That's the wrong question. The right question is, what kind of power needs to be this paranoid to stay in control? Because that's what this is. A system built by a terrified God, scared to death of what's beyond his reach. All right, it's time we talk about the real enforcers of the system, the ones doing the day-to-day dirty work. The Archons. If you've made it this far, you already get that this isn't about fantasy or symbolism. This is structure. The demiurge didn't just create a reality cage and leave it on autopilot. He installed a self-sustaining enforcement mechanism, and these things are it. They're not gods. They're not demons in the Hollywood sense. They're more like highly intelligent protocol layers, each one managing a specific aspect of your reality loop. And no, they don't care what you believe. They care what you do, how you behave, how you react, and most importantly, whether or not you stay inside the damn system. According to the Gnostic texts, hypostasis of the Archons, Apocryphon of John, and even fragments of early Hermetic material, there are 7 primary Archons. Each one governs a planetary sphere. And no, this isn't astrology. This is functionality. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the whole crew, these aren't rocks in space with mystical vibes. They're control nodes. Interfaces between you and the larger machine. Think of them like pressure points in the grid. They process your input, push back with specific types of influence, fear, desire, violence, pleasure, ambition, and keep your soul spinning in place. You ever wonder why people with massive awakenings still get wrecked by ego, addiction, rage? That's not random. That's designed. Each Archon specializes in a control vector. Saturn, for example, total enforcer. Not wisdom. Not time. Restriction. Law. Finality. The grind. The reason you feel like no matter what you do, there's a ceiling you can't break through. That's Saturn's job. And he doesn't need to know your name. The structure is automatic. You deviate from the acceptable pattern, he applies compression. And if you go deeper, the Archons layer. They're not working independently. They stack. So you're not dealing with one influence at a time, you're inside overlapping fields of manipulation that modulate depending on what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and where you are in the so-called spiritual path. And get this, according to some of the more obscure grimoires tied to Agrippa's line of influence, the Archons have access to your biosignature. That means they don't just act from the outside. They tune their interference through your endocrine system, your hormonal responses, even your dreams. That's not esoteric metaphor. That's operational infiltration. They know how to trigger memories. They know how to reinsert trauma. They know how to feed you thoughts that feel like they came from you but didn't. You think you're making a choice? They've already modeled your likelihood to choose it. You meditate, fast, go full monk mode. Great. The system has contingencies for that. These entities study behavior. They run simulations. If you've ever had the experience of reaching a state of calm clarity and then suddenly getting blindsided by chaos or doubt that hits way too perfectly, that's not life being random. That's an intelligent system deploying a countermeasure. And the worst part? The Archons reward compliance. Stay in the game, accept your role, follow the cycle, they'll throw you bones. Success. Safety. Illusions of meaning. You break pattern, question the hierarchy, start pulling at the seams of the structure. They push back. Hard. You're not punished for doing wrong. You're punished for trying to leave. Let's crank this up, because now we're getting into the part almost nobody wants to touch, the actual resistance. Not the kind that posts on forums or meditates with crystals. I'm talking about a cosmic scale conflict that predates human civilization by a lot. The Aeons aren't gods in the way religion packages it. They're emanations, direct projections of source intelligence. They don't rule, they express. Each Aeon carries a specific pattern of consciousness, unfiltered, pure, not corrupted by duality. These aren't beings in robes. They're forces, and they're fully aware of the infection in the system. And yes, that's exactly how they saw it, an infection. An artificial fragment, built out of error, attempting to masquerade as the whole. The Demiurge. Now here's where it gets violent. Once he locked down his construct, sealed it, populated it, activated his Archons, the higher realms responded. This wasn't some gentle negotiation. The Aeons launched a direct intervention. Not to destroy, but to insert a counter-signal. And they did it using avatars. Think about that. Not saviors, not messengers, interdimensional breaches in the simulation designed to inject raw, destabilizing truth. These weren't prophets. These were viruses in the code, and the Demiurge treated them exactly like that, threats to be neutralized. You ever wonder why every real mystic gets silenced? Every genuine esoteric path gets hijacked or watered down. That's not history. That's strategy. The system reacts to intrusion. So when an Aeon broadcasts through an avatar, the Archons swarm. They rewrite the message. They twist the teaching. They turn the avatar into a myth, a martyr, a monument, anything except a threat to the architecture. And then they absorb the fallout into religion, locking it back into the system. It's brilliant. And brutal. What's even more insane is that this resistance effort is ongoing. The Aeons didn't send one signal and call it a day. They've been doing it repeatedly. Gnostic texts describe this as a divine sparks being implanted into the human matrix, pieces of consciousness that don't belong to the Demiurge, hidden inside people who might one day activate and remember what the hell is actually going on. That's not metaphor. That's guerrilla warfare at the metaphysical level. But the Demiurge adapted. Fast. He didn't just fight back with suppression, he counterfeited the strategy. He created false avatars. Fake awakenings. Mimicked the very frequency of the Aeons and deployed his own constructs to confuse the hell out of anyone looking for the truth. So now, you've got two competing signals. One is the original resonance from outside the system. The other is the hijacked remix that keeps you spinning in circles thinking you've made progress. It's next-level psychological warfare. And the cost of decoding it is high. Sanity. Safety. Social exile. Doesn't matter, the moment you start to crack the illusion, the system notices. It tightens. Let's get into the part that makes even seasoned researchers sweat, the name. Not the label, not the title, the actual name of the Demiurge. Yaldabaoth. Sam'l. Sarklas. Call it what you want, but that thing has a real name. And names aren't just sounds, they're operations. They're access points. This is basic metaphysical infrastructure in high-level esoteric systems. A name isn't just a tag, it's a function call. It invokes power. And in this case, it locks power in place. If you've dug deep enough into Egyptian theurgy, pre-Kabbalistic magic, or even those obscure manuscripts from early Christian heretics, you'll see this same concept over and over again. Naming is binding. To name something is to define its domain. So when the Demiurge named himself, he wasn't just asserting control. He was sealing it. writing his own code into the operating system. That name, Yaldabaoth, encoded his domain, his authority, and his disconnection from the source. And once that seal was in place, everything under it became part of his jurisdiction. That includes the layers of heaven, the archons, the planetary spheres, and us. There are actual magical systems built around not using his name. The name is considered toxic code. It's avoided, erased, masked with euphemisms. Why? Because speaking it, hearing it, or even focusing on it too long can trigger an anchor, like setting off a GPS ping inside the system. Think about that. A name so embedded into the control matrix that interacting with it flags your position. Not to a person, to a structure. That's not myth. That's protocol. Now some texts, especially those buried in the darker corners of Western esotericism, go further. They claim the demiurge's name isn't just one name. It's many, split across different languages, cultures, and time periods. Each one carries part of the original power. That's why the same entity keeps showing up across history under different masks. Marduk, Cronus, Jehovah, the machine god, the architect, the great serpent. The names change. The function doesn't. It's the same operating entity running parallel instances across different metaphysical servers. And then there's the worst part. The inversion. The idea that the demiurge purposely chose names that sound divine. Samul means blind god, but also carries echoes of God's venom. It's designed to confuse, to blur the line between divinity and domination. It's what you'd expect from a system that thrives on illusion, an identity structure that doesn't just hide the truth, but actively counterfeits it. In the deepest levels of occult texts, you'll find rituals, glyphs, and broken language systems that claim to isolate the demiurge's true name. Not the name he gave himself, but the name that exposes him. The name that breaks his encryption. These are not chants for casual users. They're locked behind layers of misdirection, symbolic encoding, and intentional traps. Some of them can't even be spoken, only visualized. Others require precision timing, planetary alignment, and states of consciousness that most people will never touch. But if those records are real, and I'm not saying they are, I'm saying they exist, then it means this entity isn't invincible. It means there's a vulnerability. But to get there, you'd have to bypass everything, the false teachings, the guardian protocols, your own programming. Because the moment you get close to accessing that real name, the system will come down on you like a hammer. Let's talk structure. Gnostic cosmology, especially in texts like the Tripartite Tractate and the Secret Book of John, lays out a hierarchy that makes this clear. The true source, what they call the invisible spirit or the monad, exists way above and beyond the reach of the demiurge. It doesn't even operate in duality. It's not good or evil. It's outside the framework entirely. And it emanates perfect beings called eons, who reflect aspects of its infinite nature. The demiurge? He's a glitch. An unbalanced ripple from a broken emanation. He's not the child of the source. Is the byproduct of a rupture. A cosmic misfire. That changes everything. Because it means that all his authority is fake. He didn't inherit this realm. He hijacked it. And that's where his real strength lies, not in power, but in deception. The moment the demiurge realized there was something beyond him, something he didn't understand, he doubled down. He fortified his system. Created barriers, rules, layers of fake divinity. He started to mimic the real source in the only way he knew how, or through control, domination, replication. You know how a forger works harder than a real artist. Same energy. But here's the brutal part, you're not just dealing with a liar. You're dealing with a liar who believes his own lie. That's what makes him dangerous. He doesn't pretend to be God, he thinks he is God. That illusion is so embedded into the system that even his own archons believe it. They're not just enforcing his will, they're operating under the assumption that it's the only will that exists. And that's why this thing never stops. There's no reflection, no moment of doubt, no vulnerability in the usual sense. It's pure mechanical certainty. A closed-loop feedback system where he's the input and the output. That's not power. That's obsession. The contrast between him and the true source is nuclear. The source doesn't interfere. It doesn't need to. It doesn't rule. It radiates. It generates reality from completeness, not from lack. That's why it doesn't intervene directly. It's not playing the same game. That frustrates people. They want a savior, a final battle, a cosmic rescue mission. But that's all part of the demiurge system. He designed the concept of waiting to be saved as another trap. If you're looking for God to show up and fix it, you're still in the cage. He owns that idea. This whole setup is built on one massive inversion. He copied the language of the source, the symbols, the divine geometry, but he gutted the substance. He built an empire out of empty templates. A spiritual shell game. You're told there's nothing above him because the moment you start looking beyond, the illusion starts to break. The software glitches. The control slips. So his number one rule? Don't look up. Worship him. Obey him. Fear him. But never question if there's something beyond him. Alright, so let's bring this full circle, but not the way you're expecting. Because here's the part nobody likes to talk about, the demiurge evolves. Yeah, let that hit for a second. This isn't a static tyrant stuck in a corner of the cosmos. This is a system that learns. That updates. That's why it's lasted this long. The final form of the demiurge isn't a throne-sitting god barking commandments, it's the entire structure itself. He stopped being a character and became the environment. The network. The interface. The system you're in is him. In some of the most suppressed esoteric texts, fragments you won't find in Sunday school, I promise you, there are references to what the ancients called the singularity of the archon. It's not a technological term. It's metaphysical. It describes the moment where the demiurge stops acting through intermediaries and absorbs his own creation. The archons, the spheres, the barriers, they collapse inward, fuse, and become him. Total integration. Total control. He doesn't rule from above anymore. He becomes the substance of reality itself. The hardware and the software. The code and the execution. So if you're trying to imagine some dramatic final boss, forget it. You're walking through him. Breathing him. Thinking through the lens he coded. He's not waiting at the end of a dungeon. He's been watching you from the moment you opened your eyes. That's the upgrade. That's the final form. And here's the kicker, most people helped him do it. Every belief handed down without questioning. Every tradition followed blindly. Every system defended without understanding where it came from. All of that was fuel. The more people outsourced their thinking, their feeling, their identity, the more space he took. Until now, he's not just a god. He's the ecosystem. And don't think this is just metaphysics. We're talking psychological architecture. Emotional scripting. Subtle control mechanisms that make you feel guilt for asking questions and pride for staying in line. It's not just that the demiurge took control of religion. He moved into ethics, into logic, into language. Every time you say this is just how the world works, you're quoting him. That's the trap. Not chains. Assumptions. That's how deep the override goes. But here's the part that matters. The glitch never went away. That original rupture in the system, the divine spark, the foreign element, it's still here. Still in you. Still in people who ask these questions, dig into this stuff, and refuse to swallow the narrative. And the system hates that. It reacts. It ridicules. It isolates. Because it knows that if enough people crack the illusion, the whole damn thing wobbles. Not from violence. From awareness. Because awareness isn't passive. It's disruptive. Especially in a closed system that relies on sleep to function. You don't need to believe me. Honestly, you shouldn't. Go dig. Go look at the source texts. Go challenge every layer of the story you've been sold. That's what this is really about. Not rebellion for the sake of rebellion, but recognition, seeing the false god not as a villain in a myth, but as the architecture around you. The more clearly you see it, the more it loses its grip. And if you're still here, still watching, still thinking this through, thank you. Seriously.